Carl and Liam here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short, and it is getting goosebumps, and we're here. We are at the end of season 1, as we do in the double episodes 18 and 19, the Werewolf of Fever Swamp. This is not a story I remember in the slightest, book-wise, and I didn't even remember ever seeing it. I didn't remember anything about it throughout it, and I will tell you, going into it, I went, oh, werewolves. I actually ended up really liking this.
Yeah, it's definitely solid, and but I do agree that I'm not, werewolves just feels like something that's been overdone. I've seen so much of werewolves, and knowing that as a Goosebumps episode, there's only so much that they're going to be able to do anyway. So yeah, didn't get me that excited.
And yeah, and add to that as well, this obviously has the Goosebumps twist in it, and the Goosebumps twist, to me, is so fucking obvious that I ended up convincing myself of the maddest things instead, because I was like, it can't be that. It's too easy. That's too obvious. Oh, it must be this. It must be that. It must be this. And then at the end, it was like, oh no, it actually is the most obvious one of the lot, which is such a surprise.
That's not like Goosebumps.
No, no.
Not at all. But then that's a big twist in itself, isn't it?
The twist is that there's just a basic twist. And it is, of course, directed by William Fruitt. He's been the majority director throughout this entire season 1 and been responsible for a lot of the two-parters. Guess what? A new family are moving into the house.
No way.
What a great space. It's twice as big as your old bedroom, Brady.
It's kind of used.
Well, it's rustic. Rustic's in these days.
And this is a horrible looking house in a swamp somewhere. And I was just like, what? Now, thankfully, we'll explain why, but initially, like, what? The boy, Grady, played by Brendan Fletcher, is unimpressed. Again, it's Goosebumps, of course. A scream from another room gets his attention, and he and his mother, who's played by Maria Riccosia, find his sister, Emily, played by Marion Bennett, frightened by a snake. The father, Jeffrey Bowes, gives the snake to Grady to take outside. It's an introduction just to show everybody. Here's the cast, basically.
Yep. And if you don't like snakes, maybe that'll do something for you.
Yeah. All throughout the scene, Grady does the classic Goosebumps thing as well of just ripping out of his sister. She's the older one, he's the younger one, so he takes the piss. That's what they do.
Wait a minute, man. So you're telling me there's sibling rivalry?
I know.
Is that what's going on here? Oh, can't be.
I know. We'll have to one day actually remember to look into R.L. Stein's history as a child. Did he have siblings?
Yeah.
In the swamp, Grady hears noises, then gets himself lost. He begins to panic, and someone is seemingly tracking him. As Grady runs, he slams into a very angry-looking man who happens to be played by Don Franks, and we fade to black. It's that always Goosebumps introduction.
I am not lost.
Ad break.
My expectation is when we come back from black, we would naturally continue the events of what just happened. He slammed into this dude. This dude looked furious as well. What happened next? So the fact that it then goes to the next day at the house, I actually thought something had gone wrong with my video I was watching and it had cut a bit. And I went back and was like, no, apparently this is just what we don't know what happened. They're going to mention it, but not how. Like, how did you get away? Did you talk to him?
You weren't supposed to notice.
Apparently so. So the next day at the house, Emily and Grady are complaining together, and Emily brings up Grady's incident with the man. Grady then mentions his parents' experiment, and at this point I was like, is this why they're here? Experiments? What experiments? Tell us. This is weird.
Yep.
Emily finds a bug inside her face cream, which Grady just laughs about. Yeah, I mean...
Bug in the ointment.
It's terrible. We then see Grady outside tidying up, and then we see deer in a pen, and I was getting even more confused. I'm like, the fuck? So remember I said about the twist? I started to try and go, right, werewolf. The parents are going to know about the werewolf and they want to capture it, and the deer are here to lure it in. I was so sure that's what it was.
That would make a lot of sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Grady talks to his father about the deer, and it seems as now we get the plan. The plan is apparently to release these deer into the swamp once they've been tagged. And I was again like, why? Why would you be doing that? What possible scientific experiment can you be doing that tags deers and send them out to a swamp? What is it, to see how long they live in a
But
swamp?
it must be to see if they can adapt to the swamp-like environment.
Not long. I'm going to say not long, considering it's nowhere near their natural habitat.
Yeah. Well, then it'll be a short experiment, I guess.
Yeah. That's why I was convinced it was something else. But, you know, his father brings up the name of the swamp, Fever Swamp, and seems as though the man in the swamp that we saw is apparently a local hermit. Fine. This is where I then went with my other twist. Grady continues to moan about the swamp, and his father compares him to the deer and talks about adapting to the environment. And I was like, Grady's the werewolf. This is the experiment.
They're gonna love it here. And so are you.
Very interesting. Glad I could be a part of your study.
I thought you were going to say that he is one of the deer, maybe.
I mean, why not? It could be anything.
Just with Goosebumps, man, it could be anything like that, you know?
Yep. That night, Grady is trying to get the TV to work while his parents work on a computer. He annoys them and he complains about being bored. Everyone ignores him, so he goes to bed. And that is literally that scene. There's nothing else.
Yeah, I've got a comment to make about the parents, but I'll wait till a particular scene that comes up. And
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just go on.
So then we jump to the next day, and he's outside throwing a ball, where he then runs into a local kid named Will, played by Michael Barry. They talk about the lack of kids and why Grady's family is here. They're going to play together, but a noise from the swamp gets their attention, and Will begins to tell them a story about the actual swamp. The old lady who lived in Grady's house went into the swamp and never came out. That's part and parcel of it. So, all right, I'm going to say it now. I was like, well, Will's the obvious twist to me was Will's the werewolf. That was the obvious twist. And like I said, I was like, nah, it's too obvious. It's got to be something weirder.
Yeah, but they don't like present many alternatives, really. That's the problem.
Yeah, but it's Goosebumps. The alternative could literally be anything. Anything. I
do think that they do a good job of making it seem like the guy who he thinks is the werewolf, the hermit, is the werewolf. Just some of his actions, some of the things he does, you know. Especially later on, you are right. Yeah.
Will talks Grady into going into the swamp, and it's quite thick and disorientating, and Grady asks about the name. And apparently it's named as such because of a legend about the swamp infecting the mind and causing you to kind of hallucinate and stuff like that. I was intrigued. I'm really annoyed it did not develop that angle.
I was going to say, I agree. That sounds far more interesting than werewolves to me.
Yeah.
You know, this creepy swamp that makes you get this crazy fever, and it affected this hermit. That just sounds like a lot more interesting.
Yeah, because then we could have done hallucinogenic side of things, where it's hallucinogenic part of the swamp.
Who
makes
knows?
You see werewolves.
Who knows exactly? They're not werewolves at all. Maybe they're the deer or something that are set loose or anything. You know, just you could have done a lot with that, really.
Yeah, and you can go one step further as well, as then the parent science experiment is to see how this fever in the swamp affects the deer.
Yeah, and maybe that's also why they brought their son there, because they also wanted to try on a human subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've just written a better episode. The sound of a horse causes Will to panic. And that really surprised me, because we never see a horse again in this episode at all.
No.
But he runs off with Grady shortly behind him. A little further along, Will trips Grady up. And we see they're being chased by the hermit. They hide for him and then sneak around behind them. And Will says he's the reason people disappear in the swamp and suggests that he is a werewolf.
They can't prove it, but he's the real reason people keep disappearing.
My dad says he's harmless.
Don't believe it. He's been roaming around this swamp for 50, 60 years.
That night, it's a full moon and Grady hears a wolf howling. The family talk over dinner, the kids complain, and Grady tells them about Will, specifically the story about the fever, the old lady, and the werewolf. And obviously, because it's Goosebumps, everybody dismisses his crazy mental ranting because he's a lunatic.
Boy that cried wolf once again. It's reared its ugly head. That's like the triple threat right there, man, in this one episode. You know, the kid being forced to move to somewhere he doesn't want to move to. Then you got the sibling rivalry. You got, well, it's four things. You got the parents are a bunch of pricks, and then obviously that one too. That's all four, man.
Yeah, it's very box sticky. Inside Grady's room, we see the back of Grady's skateboard. Did you see what was on the back of his skateboard?
Was it a Goosebumps reference? I believe it was. Yeah.
Haunted Mask 2.
There you go. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the cover of the Haunted Mask 2's book. It's night and Grady wakes up feeling.
So wait, doesn't that kind of confirms that Goosebumps exists within the universe of Goosebumps?
Well, yeah.
Which kind of like that doesn't that almost that ties into the movie with Goosebumps with Jack Black in a way, a little bit ties into it, man. It was canon all along.
Goosebumps is getting super meta. This is getting yeah. It's going to turn out to be by the end of it. It's like Lost and something like that. Grady wakes up feeling ill and he panics and checks his temperature in the bathroom to see he's fine. So in this scene, you kind of get it. He was worried he got caught the fever. Didn't mind it. The deer outside seems spooked, so he goes out and sees something moving nearby. He goes back inside and starts to lock all the doors, but the back door creeps open slightly. As he goes to close it, it bursts open and the dog jumps on him. Now, from the perspective of this scene, this is where I was kind of like, what the fuck is with these parents? This dog is jumping all over him and it's barking. It's making a lot of noise. His mother and sister come down and find him and the dog. And the father comes from outside and they're all like, oh, it's just a dog. What are you worried about? It's just a dog. The dog was jumping all over him. It could have been attacking him.
Grady? It's gonna kill me! Go away. Honey, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
That was trying to kill you?
Yeah. That's true.
You know, particularly with what they will think the dog did later.
Care a lot more about those deer.
Yep. Grady wants to keep the dog, but as it has no collar, and the father eventually agrees once he checks the dog doesn't belong to anyone, which is fair. Look, that dog could be anyone's. You can keep it, but let me check in town to see if it belongs to anybody. Fair. The next day, Grady is playing with the dog and wants to name him Vandal. Vandal because of the mess he made, apparently. We didn't see that mess. The mum is setting up a telescope as it will be a full moon tonight, and there will also be a lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
Detail.
Kids aren't impressed by that though, are they?
And Grady is worried because, you know, werewolves, and obviously his mother's like, shh. Basically, I'm generally surprised a lot of the time at this stage in the show, the parents weren't just going, shut up, you prick. Shut up, you prick. I hate you. Because the way they act to him about this.
Or just simply, shh.
Yeah. Later, Will and Grady are wandering the swamp with Vandal, and Vandal begins to bark, and the kids come across Wolfsbane as hanging in a tree, and then talk about the silver bullet thing not being real. Apparently, werewolves spread that because peasants couldn't afford silver bullets, so it means they're less likely to be shot. All right.
Sure.
I've never heard that. That was a brand new bit of werewolf lore I've never heard before.
Way to go, R.L. Stone.
Yeah, man. They've gone too far in, though, and Will wants to go back. Alas, Grady falls down a hill and finds himself in a bog. Will says that they're in the heart of the swamp and a kid had died there. Now, we haven't mentioned it yet, but we'll do it here. I really like the place they're in. This is where this is shot. The swamp itself and this bog area. I think it looks great.
Yeah. That's something I took note of, that the set is really well done. If it's a set or a real swamp, I'm not sure. I mean, it looks super realistic. It's got a creepy vibe going on for sure. Looks good.
They utilize mist really well. That gives me an Evil Dead vibe.
Where are we?
Fog is supposed to be the heart of the swamp.
Yeah, no, I get that, yeah. It looks very swamp-like. There's no doubt.
For whatever reason, they decide to test out how deep it is, and Will puts his arm in, and you can see what is coming here a mile away. Something grabs his arm, and Grady tries to help. Will then pulls it up, and he's got a shoe, and he laughs, and it was a prank. You know, it's obvious. They then hear Vandal going crazy, and Will says someone is watching them. They grab some Wolfsbane and leave, and that's the end of that scene. There's a lot of that where it just sort of like, this feels like there should be something more, and it's not, we just end.
Yeah.
Later, Emily is outside the house and finds a bunny rabbit, a dead one. She's upset, screams, and then we cut to her being in a lab with her parents, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? What is going on? She is upset about this bunny. She says to her mother, oh, he was just lying there dead with his eyes open, when literally half a meter away, her father is cutting the bunny up, dissecting it, apparently.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I think these have to be some of the weirdest parents so far in a Goosebumps episode. It is like strange.
Grady arrives, Emily blames Vandal, and his father says the bunny was killed by an animal. Grady tries to blame it on a wolf in a swamp, but obviously no one listens. I mean, of course it was likely to be the dog.
Also, you know, of all the episodes up to this point where they've done the whole boy that cried wolf, we should have seen it coming that before they close out the season they would do literally the boy crying wolf. You know, it is the literal thing. Grady and Will are then back in the swamp, and Grady's decided to find a hermit shack to prove Vandal's innocence. That's his plan. It's not a good one, but it's a plan. No, I mean, they know the hermit's there. They're aware of his existence. But yeah, I mentioned before how I thought the parents in this were like also weird, but also like a bunch of pricks.
Yeah.
You're going to mention it. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to mention about how they now want to dispose of the dog after the incident. But I just thought the way they handled that and the way they've handled like lots of things, it just like made them look really terrible, basically. Because they say specifically they like do it all in front of the boy, like, and they literally say that they're gonna that they'll get him a new one, and it's just like you guys completely suck, you know. Yeah,
the bunny incident and the part that's coming up involving the deer is the kind of thing where you really get that stuff happening as well.
Yeah, and early on when he's like first moved there, and he tries to come in and get the TV to work, and he's quietly just twisting the knobs trying to get it to like find a signal in there. And they basically just tell him to like he's being annoying and like to go away. And it's like, bloody hell, man. Why do you have kids?
You get the impression throughout that they don't really like Grady.
No, you definitely, yeah. That's why maybe it would have made sense if it was some kind of like experiment or something instead. Maybe he wasn't even their child. That makes sense based on the way they treat him, you know.
No, true, absolutely. So yeah, on the way to the hermit's house, Will isn't happy about it, but goes along, and they find it, but while looking in the window are startled and scared off by the hermit, because obviously he lives there. So what were they expecting?
Yeah.
They run, they're chased, and Grady ends up in a trap caught in a net. Will goes to help, but the hermit arrives, and the hermit does act very feral-like, the way he kind of groans and makes noises and doesn't really say much, and he drags Grady off in the net. He brings Grady back to his shack and starts to eat some meat and the bone. They're really trying hard to make him look like the villain here, but you know, when Goosebumps always does this, where it's like, this is the villain, and it's so obvious it is, you already know he's not. You know he's not. Grady pleads to be let free and makes the threat of his parents and guns. I did like the fact that the hermit's response to that is to get up and show him Grady that he's got his own gun. And I was like, well, that shut you up, didn't it?
Also, guns. Don't really see many of those in Goosebumps.
That is true. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
Night is falling, and the hermit notices. He starts to check Grady's face, which I thought was interesting, because there's a kind of clue that he might not be, yeah. So he sort of moves it back and forth to sort of see if there's anything going on. But then he goes outside to see the moon and starts howling at the moon. It's like, what? Okay.
Are you a werewolf or not, man?
Later, I realized that I suspect this was probably to try and draw the werewolf in, because he wants to kill the werewolf, doesn't he?
That was a pretty convincing howl. I'll give him that.
I wondered about that. I wondered if it was they just used a dog or a wolf's howl and just put it over his voice, right?
Oh, no, I imagine that, but I mean, like in the show, you're supposed to believe that it's him doing it, so it's quite convincing.
It is
Also,
convincing.
based on how the episode that ends, like the final part of the end of the episode, I don't know, like what sense that makes then. But
No. Well, Grady uses this opportunity to get out of the net and out the back, and he runs off through the swamp and home. At home, his panic and desperation to leave does actually frighten his mother. His father is gone to town, and Emily apparently took the other car. So there's no actual leaving. His mother obviously wants to know what happened with the swamp hermit, but for whatever reason, I couldn't understand this. Grady decides and doesn't tell her about A, being caught in a net and held hostage.
yeah, like that should have been his angle, that he like kidnapped him and put him in like a net, rather than just, because it's like these things in all these episodes, just they're not going to believe you about the werewolf, man. You've tried, they're not going to believe you. That's something like, just go with something that they would actually be concerned about, you know?
Yeah, but then it's his parents, so they probably wouldn't give a shit either.
Probably not.
Oh, you're telling lies, the hermit's fine. Because yeah,
How
Grady
did
says.
he-
So yeah, of course, Grady says that the hermit's a werewolf, and that's instantly it. She's like, "Oh, will you shut up about werewolves, you massive prick?" Basically.
That's why it kind of like made me think that they did know what was going on, because they are purposeless. Like every time he mentions it, they're trying to detract from it. They're trying to like steer him in a different direction and they don't want to talk about it, like almost like they're aware, you know?
Which is why I was convinced the obvious twist wasn't what it was, because there was so much of this stuff. Grady then goes an interesting route to try and convince her. He tries to explain to how science isn't always right. And I was like, okay, that's an angle to go at, telling a scientist that, look, you know, science isn't always right and sometimes things can't be explained. And I was like, okay, so it's a different angle to go for. They then hear noise at the deer pen. Vandal is barking and a deer tries to actually climb through the window. So clearly there's a panic going on out there. Outside, Vandal is going crazy and we see the deer pen has been ripped apart. Several deer are gone and there's one dead in the pen. So I was like, okay, shit went down. The mother blames it on Vandal and Grady tries to stick up for the dog. This is where it's kind of like, oh, we're getting rid of this dog. I mean, the earlier scene was where the father was giving it all, we'll get you a new dog. This is where the mother's like, oh, and she grabs the dog by the collar and is going to put it in the barn to keep it away. But then Grady, the dog manages to escape her grasp. And while she's in the barn, Grady locks her in and says it's for her own protection. Kid's gone mad.
Yep.
They are straight, Mom!
Grady! Open the door!
You'll be safe in there, Mom! It won't be able to get you!
Grady! Grady!
He goes off after the dog, but he hears Will scream. So Grady goes to Will's house to find it empty and basically trashed. It's implied like a werewolf or some creature got in there and pretty much trashed the place. Claw marks everywhere, things knocked everywhere. Emily arrives back and finds the house is empty, of course, calling out for her parents. So basically what we now do is two different shots where we jump between the two. One with Grady inside Will's house, one with Emily inside their house. And we jump back and forth between the two. I really wish they wouldn't do this. Do one sequence, do the next sequence, then you can combine them.
Yep.
Inside Will's house, it appears as though they like hunting deer. And Grady continues to look around and it looks like the house was attacked by a wolf. And he thinks, obviously, the werewolf got Will. That's kind of what he thinks. Meanwhile, Emily then hears a growl in her house. And then we're back to Grady. He hears more growls. So he goes outside looking for Will. This is where we finally kind of get a close-up shot of the werewolf. And I think it looks pretty good. You know, it's not CGI.
Yeah, decent.
Yeah. It chases Emily and we do it from a POV sort of slow motion shot, which I quite liked as well, because it kind of hides any limitations you've got with an outfit and moving around.
Quite Evil Dead as well.
True. Emily runs out and into the same barn as her mother. They lock themselves inside as the werewolf tries to break in. We do now see it fully. And while it is a little bit, when it's like fully in the shot, I think it's a bit too humanoid for my liking, a little bit too much like it's a human looking. I still don't think it's bad.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The women manage to fight it off and hurt it, sending it running off into the swamp where Grady is still looking for Will and Vandal. The werewolf now starts to chase him, and Grady runs, but it ends up being caught in the net trap that the hermit reset up. The hermit obviously then arrives, and Grady realizes, well, he obviously wasn't the werewolf. So who was the werewolf? The hermit now talks to the werewolf, and it seems as though he was been hunting it in revenge for this werewolf killing his family. So you got quite that dark thing angle there.
Yeah, there's death involved.
Yeah.
You took my wife and children, everything I ever loved. I swore one day I would take your heart the way you took mine.
But up close, when he gets up close to the net, it's not a werewolf, it's a deer inside it. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that works. It's dark at night. From distance, you would maybe be able to tell the difference. And the actual werewolf arrives and seemingly kills the hermit.
Yeah.
Never seen again.
Not seen again. Must be dead.
The werewolf chases Grady, but before it can strike, the lunar eclipse happens and the werewolf transforms back. Guess who it was all along? We all know it. Who else could it be?
Not the hermit, that's for sure.
It's Will. It was Will all along. And I like the fact...
Yeah, the only other character.
Yes, absolutely. The one that knew so much about werewolves.
Get away!
Will!
Get away, Grady!
Yes.
While human, he tells Grady to leave as he doesn't want to hurt him because he can't control himself as a werewolf. I actually really like that.
Yeah.
But Eclipse is ending, and Grady watches as Will transforms back. Don't be excited. This isn't an American Werewolf in London. You're not actually getting to see a transformation scene.
No, not going to go that far.
But we do get a cool ending, as it's Vandal that saves Grady. He comes running out of the trees, jumps into the werewolf, and knocks the werewolf down into the bog, where it sinks under and obviously drowns. And I was like, damn, that's a... Because bear in mind, Will was a kid.
Yeah.
That's some
brave
shit.
Yeah.
Sometime later, and the house is improving, the family are having dinner, and while his family believe Grady and Emily did deal with a wolf, they still don't believe the werewolf thing. And I didn't mind that. I was a bit like, yeah, they never actually proved that. It could have just been a wolf. Yeah.
Very true. Yeah.
Now, again, this is where I was convinced we were going to get a twist. Because we then see the parents are watching Grady sleep, and the look on their face, they look almost angry. And I was like, oh, are we about to get another reveal here? But no, they just go...
Must have been like intentional, I think, though, just to try and make you think there was going to be like some kind of twist here with the parents, because it's been such a running theme, you know. Well, there's been episodes where there's been twists involving parents doing weird things with experiments and whatnot. I think like they were just they made them act really weird and suspicious to try and throw off the scent of the obviousness of, you know, the boy being the werewolf.
No, you are right. You are right. Because all they do is turn around and say to each other, oh, we're glad he's not having those dreams anymore. And then they leave. And then you get a cheap sort of jump scare as Grady sits up in bed as the werewolf. But that's just a dream. So he's not actually a werewolf. Or is he? Because in what is probably the most head-scratching ending we've done in a while, we then see in the swamp the skeleton of the werewolf sort of bubble up to the surface. And I had to like rewatch it where I was like, oh, that's a skeleton of a werewolf. That's pretty dark. But then you see Grady outside. It's a full moon. And he starts to howl.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yes, I don't get it at all either.
Like, is he supposed to be a werewolf now? I mean, well, then why isn't he transforming into a werewolf? Like, why not do it, go the whole hog with it and show him start to transform and run off?
Yeah, like, that would have been a great moment if they did want us to do some kind of transformation with a werewolf. That would have been a great moment to do it, you know. But no, a lot of these episodes just feel like they have to have something tacked on at the end, you know, which is not necessary. The story's been concluded, you know.
Yeah. I agree. And it's not even like, oh, it's an ambiguous ending, so you can enjoy the idea is or not, because it's not that ambiguous. Because if he's howling at the moon, it's pretty clear there's something going on there. Whereas our previous double episode, A Night in Terror Tower, we praised the fact that it didn't feel like it dragged, and the 2 episodes felt quite substantial. Here, I think it's the opposite. I think we've got very light content stretched over a 40-minute, 45-minute runtime.
Yeah, I just didn't have that much to say about this episode, because I think on the whole it is like a solid little werewolf horror tale for kids, you know, and it's based on a classic concept, so you can't like hate on it for that. And of course, there are a lot of episodes that are, so it was obvious that at some point he was going to touch on the classic monster or the werewolf. I was kind of glad that he's done it, and it's like out the way now. Yeah.
I agree. There's not really much depth to this. The positives I take out of it, I like the location, the swamp, the bog, and the area and all that. I think the acting, for the most part, is solid. I think the characters are the problem. The characters are the problem. I say the parents trying way too hard to make the hermit seem what it is. The kids, when they're together, all they're ever together is to spout exposition about the sort of swamp and werewolves. There's not much chemistry there beyond that.
It's just it just pinpoints for me that like doing a werewolf story well is not that easy, and I think they knew that right off the bat, and that's why they threw in all these random bollocks, you know, because they were trying to like spice it up a bit, but it just wasn't. Didn't really work.
Yeah, and particularly if you're watching them in blocks as we do for these series, following A Night in Terror Tower, and I saw, oh god, it's another 2-parter, because they're the ones that take the most notes, if you believe. I wasn't really up for this, so I was pleasantly pleased that I didn't hate it, and I was still satisfied in regards to it's a Goosebumps story. But I just kind of was like, okay, it's done. I probably would. This would be one I'll forget.
Yeah, so it's not like it's bad by any means. I think it's just not exceptional and more memorable. Like you said, it's forgettable.
Yeah. And that wraps up season 1. That is the last episodes of season 1. So, well, we'll be starting season 2 at some point in the future. Let us know.
Really strong episodes to come.
Oh, I can't wait, because a lot of it's so new to me. But for this one, let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?